What's the most uncomfortable, awkward scene you've ever seen in a movie or TV show?
So one time my grandparents were staying at my house and they asked how to use the TV. I was out of town and just told them how to get on Netflix. Their first suggestion was that Black Mirror episode where they make the guy fuck a pig. They watched it and were so horrified it really wasn't even funny. I couldn't even put it into context for them really. They thought that was the stuff I liked to watch. My grandma called me completely distraught asking how to turn the TV off, and my grandpa had left the house because he was so disturbed. Emo. It's still the most fucked up Black Mirror episode. Not only because of the pig, or the people's pleasure to watch the act, but also because his workmates, people who could have been in his place, turned their backs on him just because they saw him as less worthy human than the royal girl. It tells so much about humanity, it makes me sick. Reminds me of the time I took a school trip to Australia. I was sitting next to a classmate's grandparents who were chaperones and was looking for movies to watch since the flight was about 18 hours or so. I decided to watch the original version of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo without knowing what it was about, only that it was popular and based off of a book. Nothing like sitting next to your elders, on a long flight, watching some extremely graphic rape scenes. Oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about that. I'd never heard of the show before, so when my husband said someone suggested we watch Black Mirror, I thought it was a movie. He got it ready on Netflix while I was doing something else, and after watching it I was just disgusted that he had a friend who thought that was the type of thing we'd enjoy. It was awful. I later learned that there were more episodes, i.e. not just a movie, that while still kinda weird were far less horrifying. Happiness. The scene where the father admits to his 12-year-old son that he is a pedophile and has raped boys his age. At one point the son asks him if he was ever going to rape him, and the father replies, "No, I'd just jerk off instead." I felt like I needed a shower after watching that movie. When I saw Happiness in the theater, there was a group of what looked like college freshmen. Theater was across the street from a university, busting up laughing at that scene and all throughout the movie. The film made me feel awful about the miserable characters, and on top of that just flabbergasted at those kids' howls of laughter. It was way past the involuntary chuckles some people have in uncomfortable situations. One of the hardest movies I've ever had to sit through was You Were Never Really Here with Joaquin Phoenix. In the movie he plays a man with PTSD, so literally any time throughout the movie the director decided to have random cutscenes to his traumatic experiences to simulate what PTSD feels like. The whole time in the theater I was on pins and needles. Basically every end moment before the time jumps in butterfly effect. It was a great movie and these uncomfortable to watch moments were intended as such. If you don't know about it, there was something horrific going to happen, child abuse, an explosion, things like that. But the movie never actually showed these scenes. You were just directed so you were aware what was going to happen next second. Cut, silence and dark screen for a moment. Just enough time for your brain to continue that missing second on its own. This way these moments became much bigger than if they would have been actually visible on screen. The guy being stabbed in Saving Private Ryan. If you've seen it you know exactly which part this is and why it's so horrible to watch. I hated this scene to the point that I haven't watched this film a second time. I first watched it in like 2003 quarters or thereabouts and have never watched it since, as I know that scene is in the film. When I was a kid, it was when Squidward got his toenail ripped off by SpongeBob. It was totally out of place and startled me. As an adult, I'd say almost all of the Ozymandias episode in Breaking Bad. It was thrilling, but I had to stop the episode my first watch a couple of times because there were so many awful, gut-wrenching situations characters found themselves in. Definitely the masturbation scene in Her. I watched that on the big screen, man. Never before have I been surrounded by people wanting to crawl out of their own skin, for what, 2 minutes? It felt like hours. Are they really going there? Of course they have to go there. Okay, we get it. Okay, you can stop now. Please, God, let it be over. Any time now, gotta give the actor credit for even trying. That took balls. The scene in Better Call Saul where he gets the job at the copying machine company and then rips the enthusiastic owners for hiring him on the spot. There are a lot of scenes that were painful to watch in Better Call Saul. The one where he wants to celebrate and Kim is leaving for a big meeting and he just doesn't understand that she's busy and expects her to drop everything to do a shot with him. Oof. The outcome of that doesn't make it better either. Also where Jimmy is Kim's +1 for the holiday party and talks about skiing in Aspen. This man is amazing at manipulating people and knew exactly what he was doing and just kept going. Uncomfortable but not awkward. The confrontation on the road in Nocturnal Animals. It's a long and uncomfortable scene that is just masterfully done. I didn't see a single man, but Tom Ford won me over as a director from Nocturnal Animals alone. I watched The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with my ex when we were dating. There is a rape scene and right as it started her parents walked in. OMG. You dragged up a memory my social anxiety had buried. I loved this series of books and my university was doing a free showing of this movie one Friday night. Now, the ladies in my Catholic Bible study group knew I had read these books and they suggested we go to the showing as a group bonding activity. I tried to discourage them gently, saying I didn't think the content of the movie was good for Bible study bonding. Being a 19-year-old with social anxiety, I could not work up the courage to outright say, you'll have to watch a rape scene followed by a revenge rape scene sometime later in the movie. So the Bible study ladies go and sit with me at the movie. The whole time I'm tensed up waiting for the horrible scenes in question. These poor sheltered ladies had their faces contorted in such horror during the first rape scene. During the revenge scene, the most devout one said, "Sweet Christ," out loud, which had to be the most obscene thing I've ever heard her say. That woman is now, 10 years later, a nun. That memory has been deeply buried, so thank you for dredging that up for me right before bedtime. I was on a night out in my uni town a couple of years ago and one bar had a TV in the corner. Usually they would have this TV switched to a music channel like 4 Music or something similar, but on this occasion they must have accidentally turned on film 4 instead because they were showing this film but on mute, with loud music blaring out of the speakers. We ended up seeing this brutal rape scene to the tune of "Don't You Want Me" by the Human League. Bro, this brought back a memory. I think the movie was The Last House on the Left, or I'm actually not sure what movie it was, but there was a rape scene. I watched it with my ex's older sister, her younger sister, her brother and her mom. When I was like 16. To say it was awkward wouldn't be the half of it. The mom tried to turn it into a lesson on consent and told me and her son, if a woman ever says no, it's no. And I was like, yeah of course, and she just stared at me, all while the fucking rape was happening in the back. The orgy in Sausage Party didn't help that I saw it with my dad in theaters. So the first time I watched Team America was at my parents' house way back in the day. There I was, chilling in front of the big TV in the basement with the surround sound blasting, laughing my ass off, and my dad walks into the room. He casually asked what I was watching. Before I had a chance to explain anything, as if on cue, the puppet sex scene began. There was my dad, looking more and more disappointed as this gratuitously long scene just carried on and on. I tried to explain but simply could not find the words. My old man just stared blankly through the sex and the scat, and once the scene had finished he just left the room without another sound. We didn't talk for a few days after that. God, that was so bad. It was like they gave Seth Rogen a decent script for a somewhat original animated comedy, and he just deleted a bunch of shit so he could add shock humor. So much potential with that movie, and a lot of clever humor, but man, you can really see the parts Seth Rogen tried to shoehorn in. There are about a dozen ways that movie could have ended where it would have been good. That scene in the movie Bone Tomahawk, where 2 of the natives are holding a man upside down by his ankles and split him in half from groin to chin with said tomahawk. The imagery is one thing, but it's the sounds that make it. Oh man, I watched that movie with both my siblings and my parents. Keep in mind that the rest of my family, particularly my parents, are conservative and want movies to entertain them in a wholesome, uplifting sort of way only. They will hate a movie if a lovable character dies or if the ending isn't happy enough. Horror movies are out of the question. So you can only imagine the reaction when we watched the scene in Bone Tomahawk. Everyone was closing their eyes or shielding their face from the screen, except my dad, who just stared wide-eyed and horrified. We kept telling him to look away, but it was like that scene in the Ark of the Covenant in Indiana Jones, and he couldn't avert his eyes. He was so mad afterward and kept saying, "Who picked that movie?" Haha, but I will say that after a few weeks, my mom was like, "I can't stop thinking about that movie. I think it was actually a good movie." 1995 Blockbuster still existed. Rented the movie Species. Parents decided to watch, even though they don't like sci-fi much. Lead actress Natasha Henstridge went full nude. So fucking awkward. It's not just that it's full nude, she's also an alien who kills the men gruesomely right after they come in the sex scenes because she just wants to get impregnated. I went to see this in the theater with my mom as a 13-year-old because we liked watching X-Files together and it looked similar. And after an eternity of awkward silence trying to act like everything was normal, my mom says, "I think this is too violent, don't you?" And we left and never spoke about it. Shameless. Fiona was cheating on her boyfriend, who was her boss at the time, with his brother. One of the most awkward, painful scenes that comes to mind is in Meet the Parents when Greg spikes the volleyball into Pam's sister's face in the pool. Her nose immediately starts gushing blood and the mom even jumps into the pool fully clothed. It's so hard for me to watch because Greg puts up with so much shit from Pam's family throughout the movie, and then he does that to top it off. Now that I've grown older, I've kind of started to be angry at Pam for not doing more to defend Greg from her asshole relatives. She just let them eat him alive. Immediately leading up to him spiking the ball, forced to wear some borrowed Speedos which his is super uncomfortable wearing. After letting a ball go past him, Jack angrily slaps the water. "You gotta spike those, Fokker. You gotta spike those." Huddling up. "We're getting killed out here." Yay. Well, if Florence Nightingale over here would play some defense, which is just another of a whole day's worth of digs at him being a male nurse. On Survivor, there are hidden immunity idols that can protect contestants from getting voted out. The idols are usually at the contestants' camp, buried in the sand or hidden in a tree. This one contestant is convinced that the fleur-de-lis on the tribal council podium is an idol. When Jeff Probst asks if anyone has an idol they'd like to play, the contestant gets up, tries to pull the fleur-de-lis off the podium and then says he wants to play the podium. Jeff tells him it's not an idol and the contestant got voted out. I felt so much second-hand embarrassment. Man, maybe not the scene itself, but the experience of seeing a history of violence in at the theater with my dad sure was something. There's this, I wouldn't say random per se, but an unexpected, rough sex on a staircase scene. Apparently no one in the audience was prepared for that. Everyone was so uncomfortable that we all just started nervous laughing during it, the whole thing. It was a cool movie, but I still laugh every time I think of seeing it in public. My dad and I joke that we just shouldn't watch Vigo movies together anymore after the naked sauna knife fight from Eastern Promises. Lame, but there are a lot of episodes of The Brady Bunch I can't watch. Mostly Jan or Peter episodes, like when Peter saves that girl in the toy store and he keeps accepting toy rewards from the girl's mom, or when Jan gets a wig and everyone laughs at her. A lot of embarrassing situations that I know are both fictional and resolved happily, but I can't, I get uncomfortable. The opening to the Christmas episode of Black Mirror. The scene is a first-person view of a guy hitting on women at some sort of Christmas party with the help of a friend in his ear that can see what is going on telling him what to do. If I wanted to watch a POV shot of awkwardly hitting on women, I would go do it myself. Probably in Rocky when he first goes out with Adrian. I watched it for the first time recently and it is textbook. How not to treat a woman. She literally said multiple times, "I don't want to come in. I want to tell someone where I am. I'm uncomfortable." I was appalled that this is how their romance started. My boyfriend is a big fan of Rocky. I finally watched it with him a few weeks ago. If I remember correctly, he also physically stops her from leaving by shutting the door as she's trying to open it. She's trapped between him and the door. That scene was straight disturbing for me. My boyfriend couldn't comprehend why I didn't think Rocky was a good guy and a lovable character. Oh, he straight up raped her in my opinion. Assuming you were supposed to believe they ended up having sex. He manipulated and coerced her until she gave in, and another ridiculous thing I noticed is that she never wore glasses again after that scene. That's a classic sign of controlling behavior. I knew you were pretty under those things. Oh, okay, I guess seeing things doesn't matter as long as you think I'm cute. My husband definitely agreed it didn't age well and was super creepy. But to be fair, he doesn't understand the horrible stigmas of did his favorite movie Fight Club perpetuates. That one people are much less willing to hear though. The statue was actually commissioned for a scene in Rocky III. Stallone gifted it to the city after the movie wrapped. It was also used in Rocky V as well as the film's Mannequin and Philadelphia. Most Philly folks have a love-hate relationship with the statue. There was quite a brouhaha, which divided the city, over where it should be permanently placed after the film. It's been booted off the art museum steps and moved to the Spectrum a couple of times, before finally ending up on the bottom steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum. Most Philly folks are meh about it, but it's a huge must-see for tourists. Not me, but I once convinced my friend to check out Black Mirror on Netflix. For some reason unbeknownst to me, she decided to watch it at Thanksgiving with her boyfriend and his conservative family, who had invited her over for the first time to get to know his folks. She didn't start with season 1, but with season 5, the first episode of which is Striking Vipers. They still going strong. Personally, a really stupid one, but still the discomfort of that scene in The Walking Dead where Noah gets torn apart by the zombies. For a show about zombies, that one just felt waay too much. Especially if you were a fan of Everybody Hates Chris, although the edit adding that sting of Everybody HAAAA Tess Crease to the scene lessens the discomfort. I found that the scene in which Deckard convinces Rachel to stay and sleep with him in Blade Runner to be very awkward and cringy. I don't think it aged well. I dunno, he basically forced it on her to stay even though she was saying no, and it totally did not nail any sort of passion that they might have been trying for. Watch it again and think about it. It's real bad. Steven Universe, when he traps them and makes them talk about why they aren't dating, the conversation goes like this: Lars, yeah, I have feelings for her, but I'm glad she found someone she likes. Steven, but why didn't you talk about it? Lars, we did, Steven, but I didn't see it. Lars, that's because it was Lars and Sadie, private. I was in a hospital with some people and there was a community TV playing some drama, crime show or something, but it had a cop pull over a woman at night, and he literally bent her over and started raping her. The whole thing was filmed for TV and you just saw her lean chest down on the hood of the car with the cop behind her doggy style. You literally watch her shudder and cry as the imagined tip pokes her, enters, and rapes her while the camera just remains steady. Needless to say, we were all highly disturbed because we didn't have a remote to turn it off and it seemed so fucked for something airing on TV. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is beloved by my nuclear family. I introduced it to my wife and it went south around the Lengear counter. My wife said, "This isn't funny, it's every wife's worst nightmare." We haven't watched it since. I'm strangely okay with that. Anytime someone has ample time to explain a situation and doesn't for some dumbass reason, only to complicate matters more. But I'll guess if they did that the movie would be much shorter. I finally got around to watching season 7 of Clone Wars, so I'ma use that for reference. I was absolutely irritated with one scene where Rex, I think it was, told the squad he didn't have time to explain the plan until they boarded the ship. The scene cuts to ship flying over some hills or mountains or whatever, and they look pretty far from their base. He just started explaining the plan. It's inconsequential to the story, but I can just imagine them all boarding and then sitting in awkward silence until they've covered some distance before he starts explaining the plan. Yes. Wait, let me explain. Then the other person says, "No, I know what's happening here," and they don't interrupt, but keep protesting that the other person, "It's really not what it looks like." Soap operas did this, but even like Three's Company or anything happens for comedic or dramatic effect, doesn't matter. Just spit it out. There, listening. Just say it, don't wait for an opening. The end of Scream, the first movie, where the two guys are in the kitchen and the one is stabbing the other in the stomach and he starts bleeding out of his mouth. I can watch war movies, scalping, murder, etc., but for some reason that one scene I cannot stomach. No pun intended. 6 Feet Under. When David was having a dream sequence where his brother Nate dies and it actually happens in real life in the episode. It was heartbreaking. Also 6 Feet Under. This regards the whole episode. It is one of the most uncomfortable episodes of 6 Feet Under I watched, where David was kidnapped by some raving mad crack addict who forced him to smoke crack. That episode stayed with me for a while. The kidnap episode affected me so viscerally that after he threatened to set him on fire, I got straight up and walked out of the room. Nothing I've ever seen has had such an immediately huge impact. Couldn't watch another episode. Eventually read the Wikipedia episode summaries for closure. The scene with the devil thing and Jonah Hill in this is the end. Mostly because I'd taken my sister to see it. Well, sort of. It was her birthday, so we went to see Much Ado About Nothing. Got to the theater, not showing there. We see a Seth Rogen comedy neither of us had heard about, decided to go for it. So much awkward was had that evening. You Got to Love Your Grow Man, from Walk Hard. I watched it one night while my parents were asleep. When I got to that scene, I turned it down because I was so scared that my parents would hear and wonder what kind of music I was listening to. An honorable mention would be the old Hardee's ads with the bikini models that would always come on during the football game that I would be watching with my Christian, conservative parents. Thank God they aren't doing them anymore. Just rewatched Band of Brothers, and probably the scene in Bastogne where the American scout goes ahead of everybody and gets shot in the neck and they can't get to him because he's in the middle of an open field and the Germans are firing on them with machine guns. Probably the worst gore part in that show in my opinion. And it's really sad because they have to leave him behind while he bleeds out. Moulin Rouge. The part where Nicole Kidman mistakes Ewan McGregor for the Duke and is writhing around touching herself. Not too bad on its own, but in a room full of 14 to 17-year-old girls who had just discovered boys. At a holiday camp run by very nice but very religious people that either hadn't ever had sex or felt it was purely for procreation and nuns. The color quickly drained from their faces when they realized what the film was about. I still feel bad for them. In the UK we have a TV show called 8 out of 10 Cats. The guy who hosts it is called Jimmy Carr. On a Christmas special he brought on 2 twins called Jedward who are Z-listers. He took the piss out of them that much you could even see they were shocked. I can't explain it in much detail, but I remember watching it and actually feeling sorry for them. The scene in Fury when the crew stops in the town and stays with the 2 local women. Unpleasant to sit through, but not enough war movies draw attention to what happens when tens of thousands of tired, hungry, horny soldiers occupy a war-torn country. It's not always violent rape, but it's perhaps inevitable rape. John Bernthal can play a right bastard. The first movie I saw Eddie Redmayne in was called Savage Grace, with Julianne Moore. They were mother-son with a really messed up relationship. The ending of that movie was really hard to take. I watched it in this small theater with some friends in high school in 2007 when we were really into watching indie movies. I can stomach a lot of things, but 3 come to mind and surprisingly they're very similar. 1. When Glenn met Lucille the baseball bat on The Walking Dead, something about the suddenness, the look in his eyes and the sound that made me incredibly uncomfortable. 2 was from Casino when Nicky's forced to watch them beat his brother with baseball bats. Again the sound really pushed me over the edge along with the brutality. 3. Opie from Sons of Anarchy. This is a bit unorthodox, but the Pearl, is there something on my face moment, from Drag Race Season 7. Later on a podcast, RuPaul admitted to wanting to kick Pearl off, scream at her, and belittle her, just for being coy with her. It played off as feisty on the podcast, but when you listen back it's incredibly abusive. The moment apparently lasted just as long, if not longer, IRL. Some contestants have said that RuPaul actually watches some of the filming while in a jumpsuit from the dark when she's not required to be on camera. I love drag, but Drag Race, in the style of all game and reality shows, has been abusing and manipulating its contests for over a decade now. Dean's death in the series finale of Supernatural. It dragged on for so long. Also, whatever that was about the rest of Sam's life. I got through most of because I had started sobbing somewhat hysterically at seeing the Impala from season 1 with the original plates, but I sobered up out of pure confusion. Ended that episode by staring at my equally dumbfounded sister and asked if she was sure that was really the final episode. Still waiting patiently for them to drop the episode where Gabriel retcons all of that bullshit, and we get a proper finale. Any day now.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like the video. And if you are new, subscribe and click on the bell icon.